After the decisive victory over the Persian Empire in the Battle of Qadisiyah, the path became clear for the Muslim forces to invade the land of Persia, as a significant portion of the Persian army had been destroyed. Indeed, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas led the Muslims and entered the cities of the Persian capital, praying in Awani Kisra and fulfilling the Prophet's promise to the Muslims that their kingdom would extend to that place. However, this did not mean the end of Persian resistance. The third ruler of the Persians, Yazdegerd III, withdrew towards the city of Hulwan and gathered more forces in several strategic places to halt the Muslim advance. The Muslim forces set off on several fronts to fight the Persians and secure their victories, engaging in many fierce battles, especially in the city of Jalula, where the Persian army, led by Miran ibn Bahram, was gathered. They all succeeded in winning and forced Yazdegerd to retreat towards the city of Ray in the far east. The Muslims advanced to finally include the rest of the lands of Iraq and declare it a part of the Islamic State. Although Umar, may God be pleased with him, ordered Sa'ad to stop pursuing the Persians in their land and be content with what they had achieved, the Persians' actions forced the Muslims to move again. The situation over the next few years caused a lot of confusion in the country, and many Muslim leaders were martyred in the 18th Hijri year. The Persians tried to exploit this matter by gathering huge armies to retaliate and regain what they had lost to the Muslims. The Persian leader, Hormuzan, moved and fought with the armies of Numan ibn Muqarrin in more than one battle, ending with the victory of the Muslims and the inclusion of the Ahwaz and Khuzestan regions. West of the Zagros Mountains in the land of Persia, the greatest danger came from the army that Yazdegerd had been waiting for from the city of Maru, to which he had retreated. He sent this army to Nahavand in the depths of the Persian state. The armies left the rest of the Persian states and united to destroy the Islamic forces. The most violent battle ever occurred after the Battle of Qadisiyah between the Muslims and the Persians, and it was severe on both sides. The battle raged for several days until it finally ended with the victory of the Muslims and the martyrdom of their leader, al-Numandantada. Let's continue what happened after that in today's episode. The Battle of Nahavand was a turning point in the conflict between the Islamic State and the Persian state. It was neither small in size nor less influential than the Battle of Qadisiyah and represented a major turning point in the war. This was the last time the Persians tried to gather a huge force against the Muslims, and they never had a standing army after it. In this battle, the Muslims fought an army that was twice as big as theirs, with superior weapons, and challenged the difficult geographical conditions that the Persians used well. They were given all the defenses they had, including iron bars and iron chains. Due to the valor of the Muslims in that battle, Umar ibn al-Khattab, may God be pleased with him, ordered an annual allocation of 2,000 dinars to everyone who participated in this terrible battle. Despite the means of defense and the intelligence of the plan that the Persians followed at that time, they could not hold back the end of the battle with the same efficiency. The plan of al-Numan ibn Muqarrin was carried out successfully. The story of the Persian army in that battle reached its middle. If we take the account of Tabari, who estimated the army at 150,000 fighters, that means the fall of more than 75,000 fighters on the battlefield. If we take the account of Baladhuri, who estimated the Persian army at 60,000 fighters, that means the fall of about 40,000 fighters during the battle. There were many of them, especially the army, which was the last hope for the Persians to defeat the Muslims after many battles and continuous losses. There were also many survivors who were captured and sent to various Islamic camps to serve the Muslims. Among these prisoners was a man called Abu Lulu al-Majusi, who had been captured before by the Byzantine Romans. This was the second time he had been exposed to this matter. Therefore, he was very angry with the Muslims and said his famous sentence when he was leaving for Medina, "Omar has eaten my heart." If we look at the victims of that battle, it was a big one indeed. It was collected and divided by Sa'ib ibn al-Akra, after Umar appointed him specifically for that matter. The knight's share was 6,000 dirhams, and the soldier's share was 2,000 dinars. All those who remained to protect the Muslim soldiers were also given their share of the battle, even if they were not involved in it. There were also special rewards for the heroes in the battle. It is said that during the distribution of these spoils, Sa'ib ibn al-Akra was surprised by the great Zoroastrian priest in Nahavand, who said to him, "If you get rid of me and my family, I will show you the treasure of the last Jan. This is the treasure of the family of Kisra al-Akbar, and it will be yours alone and yours master, and you will not share anyone with." This man did not know that Sa'ib ibn al-Akra was far away from corruption and greed. When he came to him after a short time, 2 large boxes full of precious stones and stones were carried as they were to the caliphate in Medina, to be responsible for distributing them for the benefit of the Islamic State. The priest was surprised by the lack of desire for the 2 men, and was amazed throughout his journey after leaving him in safety, as the covenant between them was written. After the battle, the Muslims carried out the process of burying the martyrs near the Muslim army. Most of what fell on the last day was carried to a distance of 4 miles from Nahavand and buried below that valley, in an area now known as Baba Pareya. While that was happening, Tarif ibn Sa'b was carrying the news of victory. He reached the city and met Umar. May God be pleased with him. Umar asked him, "What news have you come with?" He said to him, "Good news, O Prince of the Believers. God has blessed us with victory." Umar praised God a lot and said to him, "What did Numan do?" He said to him, "God's mercy on him. He was not saved." When Umar ibn al-Khattab heard this news, he burst into tears and increased his number for a short time. When he returned to his tent, he asked Tarif about the identity of the person who was martyred in the battle. He counted the names of the men for him. Then he said to him, "And there is thee." After that meeting for a few days, Sa'ib ibn al-Akra came with a treasure of Najirajan to Medina, and presented it to Umar as he gave it to him. He came to Iraq to sell it to merchants, and allocate his money to develop and improve the condition of the lives of Muslims. Ibn al-Akra went back to Kufa, where he sold the treasure to one of the sons of Bani Makhzum in exchange for 2 billion dirhams, and initiated the allocation of money to reform the condition of Muslims, as Umar, may God be pleased with him, commanded. It is said that this man was able to sell the treasure in the later period in Al-Hira, after he achieved a profit of 100%. The Battle of Nahavand had a great influence on the foreign policy of Muslims. Until this moment, Umar ibn al-Khattab, may God be pleased with him, considered the Muslim men in Iraq as an army ready to move at any time. He refused their many demands to settle in the country, buy properties, and flee to rest. But after Nahavand, the wind of change came to the opinions of the commander of the believers. In one of the assemblies, Ashraf ibn Kai, one of the army men in Iraq, said to him, "O Prince of the Believers, you have prevented us from settling in the lands we entered victorious. But the Persian emperor is still on the line of life behind these lands, and they will not be satisfied with staying with us as long as he is among them. I saw that we did not take Medina except in response to their movement, and this will continue until he agrees to settle in the lands and to push their empire out of the borders of Persia, away from his people. And then his people will lose hope in his help, and will accept the reality." Umar was surprised by his opinion, and after consulting his friends, decided to allow them to own the lands. Umar's story, may God be pleased with him, up to this moment, depends on defending the lands that the Muslims entered, and preventing the Persians from attacking them if they tried to approach them. Over the past 5 years, the Muslims were a reaction to the Persians' decisions, and this needed to change. In order to ensure the safety of Iraq and the safety of the Muslims, The Persian power that threatens it forever must be destroyed, except by attacking the rest of the Persian lands and repulsing the opposing forces from them. If we look at the map, we will find that the Muslims have actually occupied Iraq, the Khuzestan region, and most of the lands of Kerman from the Persian Empire. And they still have the province of Fars, which is located in the southeast of Khuzestan, and includes the side borders of the Zagros Mountains and the province of Azagros Mountains. These three areas have formed strategic areas for future campaigns, and it was up to the Muslims to include the provinces of Fars and Isfahan first before they moved further towards the countries of Afghanistan and present-day Balochistan. Umar, may God be pleased with him, thought a lot about this matter and how to start implementing it. He went to the great Persian leader, who had been captured after the conquest of Tostra and his retreat to Medina, where he stayed after he converted to Islam in front of the prince of the believers. Umar asked him about it and said, "But if you cut the head, the wings will fall off." There was no time for the Muslims to lose, so the decision to surrender to the Persian country was indeed taken, and the best time to execute it was in the case while the Persians were still in serious confusion after Nahavand. Therefore, Umar ordered him to launch the first of the 4 campaigns, which will determine the Persian resistance and later make the Persians part of the Islamic State. He sent his workers to the provinces of Basra and Kufa, and ordered them to form armies to occupy the Persian cities, to direct the army of Basra to open the areas of Fars, Kerman, Shah, and Isfahan, and to direct the army of Kufa to open Isfahan, Hadrabi, and Ray. Indeed, at the end of the last quarter of the 21st century, a message arrived to Abdullah ibn Adnan al-Aqsa Ansari, the governor of Kufa, moved towards the towns and opened the door of the volunteer to a campaign that did not have any mandatory force to march towards Isfahan, to depose Omar ibn Yasser on Kufa instead. Umar also sent a message to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari in Basra, ordering him to march and help the army of Kufa on their way. The city of Isfahan was a great city. Alexander the Great was the first to visit the land of the Persians in his campaigns. It was considered the capital of the mountain region and consisted of 2 neighboring cities, about 3.5 kilometers from each other, which are G and Judea. G was the capital of the region, and due to the city's poverty, the Persians chose it as their residence and built a huge tower for it as a living structure, a tower of security. And inside the city was a huge castle, which was built on a steep hill. Abdullah fought with his forces until he came to Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, the prince of the Mede. Then he came to Nahavand and joined him the army of al-Numan. May God be pleased with him. Then they all went towards the group of Persians which they gathered in Isfahan. The leader of those armies was called Iskandar, and made his army leader a great sheikh at age. Shahrebaz came to his place. He met the Muslims, and they fought a fierce battle on that day. Shahrebaz asked for a fight. Abdullah ibn Warqa al-Azdai fought and killed him. The army of Isfahan was defeated, and they were defeated with great losses. The Muslims released the Sheikh Ristak after that, as the killed leader. From that place, the Muslim battalion headed to the city of Giataya. Prince Fadusifan was on it, and when they arrived, they were forced to retreat to the city. The Muslims held a siege on it for several weeks, but the news came to the Persians that there were 2 groups of Muslims who would join them after a short time for the army of Abdullah. The first group was under the leadership of the Anaf ibn Kai, who was chosen by the Caliph to enter the Khorasan region. Isfahan was on his way. And the second group was under the leadership of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, who left Basra to help the Kufa army. Fadusifan thought of running to the hill to end this siege before the rest of the army arrived. So one day he went out to meet the leader of the Muslims, Abdullah, and said to him, "Either I stand for you and you carry me, or you stand for me and I carry you." Abdullah agreed and prepared the 2 sides to fight with the spear. Abdullah stood in his place on his horse and his sword was cut off. But Isfahan went towards him at a high speed and directed a stab at him with his spear. She broke his leg and cut his belt. Abdullah fell from a horse, but he landed on his feet. Then he jumped and sat on his horse without a shiver and was ready to attack his Persian opponent. He asked Isfahan to prove his position so that he could carry him as he was known for his fighting. But when Isfahan saw Abdullah's courage and his intention to attack him without a shiver on his horse, he stopped and said to him in a very angry voice, "I saw you as a complete man, but I will return with you to your army, and I will make you righteous, and I will pay the city to you. Whoever wants to pay the..." Abdullah said, "And you have that." Abdullah wrote the Book of Peace for Prince Furs, with the conditions of Islam, which came in the name of God, the most merciful, the most merciful. A book with the story of Abdullah ibn Qaid, Abdullah ibn Warqa, and Isma ibn Abdullah. After the peace treaty with the people of Isfahan, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari came to his army through Awaz and found that the people of Gi had all entered Islam. More than 30 men left their people and headed with their Hoshaya to Korman and joined another army of the Persians who were in charge of it. Abdullah and Abu Musa entered the city of Gi, the capital of Isfahan, and guarded the city. The Islamic army and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari managed to open the two cities of Kashan and Kuaman on the north of Isfahan. This was at the end of the 21st Hijri year, announcing the end of the first part of the campaign that Umar, may God be pleased with him, started successfully. After the control of the state of Isfahan, the eyes began to turn towards the city of Ray. Isfahan was one of the most important cities in the Middle East, and they were controlling the roads of the movement towards the northeast of the Persian Empire. Therefore, the orders were issued to Naim ibn Muqarrin, the brother of the martyr Numan ibn Muqarrin, the owner of Nasr al-Nahavand, to move with an army that had 12,000 fighters against Ray to include the Hamadan region on his way, where he had revolted and violated the covenant he had established with the Muslims after Nahavand. Indeed, at the beginning of the second year of the Hijri Shina, which was established in the last month of November of 642 AD, became Naim ibn Muqarrin towards Hamadan. His brother Suwaid was in his front, and his right-hand man, Rabbi ibn Amir al-Tamimi, and his right-hand man, Muhalhil ibn Zaid al-Ta'i. They continued in this siege until they reached the city, and found that their people had been fortified by it. They besieged them in a very siege, and occupied all the surrounding areas. The ruler of the city found no way out. He asked them to surrender to them for the second time, and asked the Muslims to deal with those who responded and did not criticize the covenant. Naim answered them to that and received the reward in return for their protection. Then the news came that the people of Qazwin, Ray, and Azerbaijan had gathered in a huge army in a region called Wadi Raut. This army was led by Isfandia, the brother of Rustam, the commander of the killed army in the Battle of Qadisiyat. Naim Yazid ibn Kai left Hamadan and went out in his army until he reached the fighting area. Unfortunately, there are no details about what happened that day, but all the books say that this battle was very difficult and cruel on both sides and was equal to what happened in the Battle of Nahavand. But the victory in the end was for the Muslims. The soldiers were led by Isfandia. Some of them fled to Ray and some to Azerbaijan.